My name is Milton Barnes. I'm 72 years old and I won 58 million in the lottery. But I didn't tell anyone. Why? Because first, I wanted to run a character test on my family. What I found out completely shocked me. And what I did with that hidden fortune afterwards, well, some lessons are expensive for those who need to learn them, and I promise you won't believe what happened in the end. Before we go on, help us grow by subscribing to the channel, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. To understand why a man my age would test the integrity of those closest to him, I need to take you back to the beginning. 45 years on the Cincinnati railway line. 45 years waking up at 4 in the morning, hearing the first train whistle cut through Ohio's frozen winter silence. Hands permanently stained with grease, a back that still aches but a paycheck that always made it home. It was never a glamorous life. Neighbors went to office jobs in suits and ties while I wore my faded blue uniform. But there was pride in that. Pride in building something solid. Something that lasted. Every track I helped maintain connected families. Brought people home. When Angela was born, I promised myself she'd never go without. I saved every extra penny in a savings account with her name on it. When Cody lost his parents at 12 and came to live with us, I split everything equally. Family takes care of family. Martha, my wife, used to joke, "Milton, you work like you're building an empire." And maybe she was right. Not an empire of money, but of security. Of knowing the people I loved would be protected. I paid for Angela's college. Helped with the down payment on her house. When she married Derek, I paid for half the wedding. When Cody needed money to start his first business, I was there. I never asked for recognition. Never expected gratitude. It's just what a father, an uncle, a family man does. But in recent years, especially after Martha passed, I started noticing something that deeply bothered me. A subtle coldness. Conversations that felt scripted. Visits that always came with small favors. And then came that Tuesday morning 3 months ago when I found out I had $58 million. Alone in the kitchen, holding the winning ticket, one question hit me like a punch to the gut. If I were just Milton Barnes, a broke retiree, would anyone still check in to see if I was okay? That question kept me up at night, because deep down, I already feared the answer. The answer to the question that had been haunting me came faster than I expected, and it hurt more than I ever thought possible. The following Monday, I picked up my phone and typed a simple message. Just got back from the doctor. Terminal cancer. Only a few months left. A lie? Yes. But I needed to know the truth about the people I loved. I sent it to Angela, Derek, and Cody at the same time. Then I sat back in my chair and waited. Angela replied in 15 minutes. "Dad, that's terrible news. I'm closing an important deal today. We'll talk tomorrow, okay?" Tomorrow never came. Derek, my lawyer's son-in-law, went straight to the point. "Mr. Barnes, I'm so sorry. I suggest we meet this week to get the legal paperwork in order and avoid any future inheritance issues." Inheritance. Didn't even ask how I was feeling. Cody, my nephew, was the cruelest. He called that same day. "Uncle Milton, man, that's tough, huh? Look, I know you're going through a hard time, but a golden opportunity just came up in my business. I need 15 grand by Friday. Think you can help before, things get worse?" $15,000. While I was supposedly dying. I sat in silence for a full hour. I didn't cry. Men from my generation don't do that easily. But something inside me broke for good. That's when I knocked on Doris's door. "Milton, you look upset," were the first words she said. I told her about the cancer. She hugged me right there and started to cry. "You're not going through this alone," she promised. And not a single day went by without her showing up with soup, tea, and real conversation. She even offered her savings, $3,000 from her retirement. A neighbor with $3 grand in the bank offering everything she had, while my own family was busy calculating my inheritance. In that moment, the family betrayal became crystal clear. The love I thought I had built over 45 years was just interest in disguise. Something inside me changed forever. The kind-hearted man who always forgave was dying, and something far more strategic was taking his place. If they wanted to treat our relationship like a business, I'd show them how a real transaction works. When you reach 72 and realize the people you've loved your whole life only see you as a bank account, two things can happen. You can sink into despair, or you can do something about it. I chose the second option. The morning after that painful realization, I woke up different. The weight of disappointment was gone. In its place, something far more dangerous. Absolute clarity. Have you ever felt invisible to the people who are supposed to love you? Ever thought that in their eyes, you're just a resource? A money machine? I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a blank sheet of paper. 45 years building railways taught me one key lesson. Before you build anything, you need a detailed plan. And I was about to build the most elegant, silent revenge of my life. Step 1 was simple. Stay sick. They had bought the lie, so I'd carry it through. But this time, with purpose. I called Dr. Harrison, my physician of 20 years, and scheduled an appointment. Not to talk about cancer. I wasn't going to drag an honest man into a lie. But I did need some routine tests anyway, and I wanted a few real medical papers on hand. You never know when documentation might come in handy. Then I went to the bank. $58 million had changed my life, but not in the way you might think. I didn't buy cars or houses. In fact, my lifestyle stayed exactly the same. The only difference was that now I had the power to make choices that used to be impossible. I moved a significant amount into a separate account. Not all of it. That would raise suspicion, but enough to execute my plan. The rest stayed right where it was, quietly collecting interest. I went back home and started phase 2, observe and document. Over the next few days, every conversation with my family was carefully recorded. Every request for money, every excuse not to visit, every casual comment about my condition. I kept a small notebook where I logged everything. Dates, times, exact words. Why does someone only show up when they want something? Why does a child turn into a stranger? Angela called on Tuesday. Not to check on my health, but to drop by real quick over the weekend. When she came, she stayed exactly 17 minutes. I know because I timed it. She spent 15 of those minutes on the phone dealing with work stuff, and 2 minutes asking if I'd considered updating my will. I wrote it all down. Derek showed up on Thursday with a folder full of documents. Important paperwork for your peace of mind, he said. It was power of attorney forms, asset transfer paperwork, even a draft will he had prepared as a suggestion. All very legal, very technical, very convenient for them. I logged every document, every clause, every suggested beneficiary. Cody was the most predictable. He called 3 times in the first week asking for money. First, the 15 grand for a business opportunity. Then, 5,000 for his girlfriend's medical emergency. Lastly, 2,000 to help a friend in trouble. All the calls were recorded on my phone, a feature I learned from my grandson before he stopped talking to me. Meanwhile, Doris came by every single day. Sometimes with food, sometimes just to chat. She never asked about money, about my will, or anything that wasn't about my actual well-being. She shared stories from the book she was reading, talked about the birds she fed in her backyard, asked if I needed anything from the store. The difference was glaring. And I documented all of that too. But the true inspiration came on a Friday afternoon, when Doris brought some chicken soup and we sat talking on the porch. She mentioned a book she had read about a man who faked his own death to find out what people really thought of him. Just imagine, Milton, she said, finding out who actually cares about you when there's nothing left to gain. Must be either heartbreaking or beautiful depending on who's around you. That's when the full plan clicked into place. It wouldn't just be revenge, it would be a lesson, a public display of who people really are behind the masks of family. I was going to die, officially, and watch my own funeral. I spent the whole weekend fine-tuning the details. First, I needed an ally. I called Pastor Williams from the Methodist Church where Martha and I got married, a man of integrity who'd known my family for decades. I told him I wanted to run a character test. I didn't use the word revenge, and that I needed his help for a staged event. At first, he hesitated, but when I explained how my family reacted to the news of my illness, he let out a deep sigh. "Milton," he said, "in 40 years of ministry, I've seen a lot of families torn apart by greed. If you believe this might teach them something important, you have my support." Pastor Williams had a smaller chapel on the edge of town, used for intimate services, perfect for a discreet funeral. He offered to conduct the ceremony and even get a casket from the funeral home. Empty, of course. Step 2. the disappearance. This had to be timed perfectly. I sent a message to the family saying I was checking into the hospital for emergency treatment and might not be coming back. Then I simply left home for a few days and checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of Cincinnati. During those days, I instructed Pastor Williams to call my family with the devastating news. Milton Barnes had passed away in the night. Funeral to be held on Saturday. A simple ceremony, as per the deceased's wishes. Meanwhile, I bought a professional digital recorder and planned every detail of the observation. I'd rent a car with tinted windows, park outside the chapel with a clear view inside, and document every word, every reaction, every behavior. What would you do if you were in my place? Keep giving to people who ignore you, or finally draw the line with those who only show up for what you can offer? On Friday night, the night before my own funeral, I sat in that cheap motel room and reviewed my plan. Everything was ready. The ultimate test would take place the next day. Every detail I jotted down, every conversation I recorded, became living proof of the truth I had to face. The coldness, the self-interest, the distance, all of it recorded, all of it ready to be used at the right moment. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. It wasn't a smile of joy, it was a smile of anticipation. After decades of being underestimated, seen as the nice uncle or the dad ATM, I was finally going to show what a 72-year-old man is capable of when he decides he's done being the victim. Funny how, even after winning an unexpected fortune, I realized the greatest treasure was right beside me, in that kind and honest neighbor. They thought they knew Milton Barnes. Truth is, they had never met the strategist hiding behind the gentle retiree. And the best part? They had no idea what was coming. The game had begun, and this time, I held all the cards. In the days that followed my transformation from victim to strategist, my house became a silent headquarters where every detail mattered. The old armchair in the living room, once just a place to watch TV, now served as the command center for the most important operation of my life at age 72. Have you noticed how time slows down when you become an attentive observer? The ticking of the old wall clock, which I'd barely noticed for years, now marked every second of this complex psychological game. I, Milton Barnes, a former railway man who spent a lifetime checking tracks and signals, never imagined I'd use the same method to detect faults in the character of the people I had loved and helped the most. My phone, a simple device once used just for basic calls, became the most powerful tool in my arsenal. Every conversation with Cody was carefully recorded. Uncle Milton, you know I've always been straight with you. This investment is going to multiply the money in 6 months, he said in one of the first calls after my illness. His voice had that fake urgency of someone lying but needing to convince you fast. I get what you're going through, Uncle. That's exactly why you should take this chance while you can still see the money grow. Cody went on, unaware that every word was being recorded for posterity. It was both fascinating and disturbing to watch how transparent someone can be in their greedy intentions. My notes multiplied by the day. Angela, 17-minute visit, 15 on the phone, 2 asking about Will. Derek, avoids eye contact, closed-off body language, always steers conversation toward legal matters. Cody, 3rd call this week, more desperate tone, now asking for $20K instead of the original 15. Each entry in my notebook was like a mini emotional autopsy. I dissected behavior, analyzed motives, cross-referenced details like a detective building an airtight case. It wasn't physical surveillance. It was a microscopic study of the moral cracks, greed, and time had carved into those family bonds. 45 years working on the railroad taught me that small ignored flaws turn into major disasters. A loose bolt today causes a derailment tomorrow. The same principle applied perfectly to human behavior. Small acts of selfishness I'd tolerated over the years now revealed their full destructive potential. During in-person visits, I became a seasoned actor. I greeted Angela and Derek with my most tired face, weaker voice, and subtle comments about not having much time left. Meanwhile, my portable recorder, hidden in the coffee table drawer, captured every nuance of their responses. "Dad, you really need to think about the family's future," Angela said, sitting at the edge of the couch like she was in a hurry to leave. Derek put together some documents to make things easier when the time comes. The pause before "when the time comes" lasted exactly 3 seconds. I timed it. 3 seconds of hesitation before referencing my impending death. Derek, always the calculating lawyer, never wasted time with emotional small talk. Mr. Barnes, given your current condition, it would be wise to organize the necessary paperwork to avoid future complications. I have a few suggestions here on how to structure asset distribution more efficiently. Efficient. That word echoed in my head for hours after every visit. My death would be efficient for them. But the most striking contrast came from my interactions with Doris. While my family turned every visit into a disguised legal meeting, my 68-year-old neighbor brought a kind of comforting simplicity that soothed my wounded soul. Milton, I brought some lentil soup today. Martha used to love this one. Thought of the recipe when I saw how skinny you're looking, she said, setting the still warm pot on the kitchen table. It was amazing how Doris never mentioned money, inheritance, or efficient paperwork. Her visits were filled with shared memories, books she was reading, birds she fed in her yard, and little comforts that made the days less heavy. Would you like me to read to you a bit? I brought a book about the history of American railroads. I thought you might like it. These fundamental differences in approach became so obvious I began documenting them too. Not as evidence against Doris, of course not, but as living proof that genuine humanity still existed out there, even when everything seemed set on proving otherwise. I then dove into the files Martha had meticulously organized throughout our marriage. Shoeboxes full of receipts, handwritten contracts, unsent thank you letters, IOUs with no due dates. Every document told a story of systematic generosity that turned into chronic dependence. I found a letter Angela wrote at 17, promising to pay back every cent as soon as I graduate and get a decent job, Daddy. That was in 1987. The decent job came, the money never returned, but the requests kept coming with Swiss watch regularity. Cody had an entire folder to himself. Music project, $5,000, 1995. Food truck opportunity, $8,000, 1998. Used car business, $15,000, 2001. Crypto investment, $12,000, 2019. Every one of Cody's business ventures passed through my bank account, but none ever returned a dime, or even a formal thank you. The most shocking part of this documentary excavation was discovering that Derek had drawn up a general power of attorney in my name, dated 6 months ago, when I was in perfect health. The document was meant to free me up to focus on recovery, while he temporarily handled financial matters to ensure family stability. Translated from legalese to plain language, Derek had been preparing to take full control of my assets long before I ever got sick. The illness just sped up a plan that had already been in motion for 6 months. With the timely help of Pastor Williams, we turned the Methodist Church chapel into the perfect psychological trap. Milton, in 40 years of ministry, I've seen many families torn apart by greed, he said, as we discreetly installed the professional recording equipment. If you believe this experience can reveal important truths, you have my full support. The system we set up was sophisticated by 72-year-old retiree standards. Digital recorders hidden in 3 key spots around the chapel, directional mics disguised among the floral arrangements and my observation post in the parking lot, equipped with a long-range receiver to pick up every whisper exchanged during the service. In the 2 days leading up to the funeral, every phone call I received followed the same predictable script. Cody, Uncle, I know you're going through a tough time, but this opportunity can't wait. It's just 15 grand, you won't even miss it. Angela, Dad, Derek said you want to talk about the will. It's great you're thinking about it now. It'll give everyone peace of mind. Derek, Mr. Barnes, I've drafted a preliminary version based on our previous talks. I can come by tomorrow so we can review it together. Each call was another brick in the fortress of evidence I was building. Then came the day of the grand performance. I woke up at 5 a.m. Old railroad habits never die. Drank strong black coffee, put on my best dress clothes, and headed out for what would be, ironically, the most revealing event of my entire life. The weather played its part perfectly. Gray skies, a cold wind cutting through the empty streets of Cincinnati, a few dry leaves dancing across the chapel parking lot. The ideal setting for a funeral, even a fake one. I positioned myself in the rented car with tinted windows, a brown Buick that drew zero attention, adjusted the recording gear, and waited. The anticipation was almost unbearable. 45 years of family relationships were about to be judged in the next 60 minutes. Angela and Derek arrived together, 15 minutes early. Even from a distance, I could see they were chatting cheerfully, making big gestures, even laughing. Odd behavior for people attending the funeral of a father and father-in-law, wouldn't you say? Cody showed up last minute, as always, parked crooked and got out still typing on his phone. The entire walk up to the chapel, he never once looked away from the screen. He couldn't even disconnect for 60 seconds to acknowledge a moment that should have been filled with grief and reflection. The ceremony began right on time. Pastor Williams gave a touching sermon about unconditional love, forgiveness, and how true families reveal themselves in the hardest times. Every word felt tailored to the audience, and my recorder caught every syllable. But it was during the coffee reception after the ceremony that the masks truly dropped. "Well, at least now we can get to the practical part," said Derek, adjusting his tie while asking for sugar for his coffee. "I have an appointment with the notary office Monday morning. Honestly, it's about time we handled this," added Angela, scrolling aimlessly on her phone. "The house has become a dead weight anyway, and the maintenance costs just keep rising." "You guys think he left anything invested that we don't know about?" asked Cody, fully engaged in a family conversation for the first time in years. Meanwhile, off in a corner, Doris looked genuinely heartbroken. She held a damp tissue, stared at the empty casket with the expression of someone who had truly lost someone special, and occasionally wiped her eyes quietly. The contrast couldn't have been more brutal, or more eye-opening. At that moment, watching from my voluntary and temporary death, I realized I had documented more than just evidence of family greed. I had captured the fundamental difference between genuine love and financial interest disguised as affection. It was time to drop the bomb that would change everything. The urn is empty, just like your love for me. I'm alive, and I heard every word. What happened after that explosive reveal? How did they react when they found out the dead man wasn't just alive, but fully informed about their true intentions? You'll find out in the next part of this story of family justice. But I can tell you right now, their reaction was even more revealing than everything I had documented up to that decisive moment. Some truths only surface when people think no one's watching. Others come out when they realize someone's been recording everything from the start. The second kind is far more interesting. Believe me, the shock hit like an electric storm cutting through Cincinnati's quiet when they received my message. The urn is empty, just like your love for me. I'm alive, and I heard every word. A simple sentence, sharp as a bullet, carrying the weight of decades of documented ingratitude and archived family deceit. Ever seen a lie built over years crumble in seconds? It's a fascinating and terrifying thing to witness. In the first 15 minutes after I sent that digital bomb, my phone turned into a siren, ringing nonstop. Angela tried to call right away. 2 attempts went straight to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear her justifications. I needed to process what I'd just done before facing the fallout. Derek, always the calculated lawyer even in moments of panic, chose the texting strategy. "Mr. Barnes, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Perhaps we could speak in person to clarify any confusion that may have arisen from this situation." Misunderstanding. Confusion. I had digital recordings of every poisonous word he'd spoken during my funeral. Cody was the most desperate. He called 7 times in 20 minutes, then began flooding my phone with panicked texts. "Uncle Milton, please let me explain. It's not what it looks like. I can clear everything up. Don't leave me now." As if there were some magic explanation for inheritance talk next to my supposedly occupied casket. It was fascinating to watch how each one reacted exactly as their personality would predict. Angela, emotional and impulsive, going for direct contact like a desperate child. Derek, always composed, trying to manage the situation with carefully worded distance. Cody, reckless and dramatic, attempting to fix everything through sheer persistence. But I wasn't ready to talk to any of them. I needed time to digest what I'd discovered about the people I thought I loved, and more importantly, to plan my next strategic moves. For the next 48 hours, I maintained absolute silence. I didn't answer calls. I didn't reply to messages. I didn't show up at the window when they knocked, increasingly panicked. It was like I had actually died and passed into another realm, only this time by choice, and only for a little while. That period of isolation gave me a rare perspective on their real desperation. The messages evolved, from weak excuses to pitiful pleas, from pleas to defensive accusations, from accusations to emotional blackmail. Derek went as far as to suggest I was clearly emotionally unstable due to advanced age and needed professional psychological help to cope with natural cognitive decline. Paranoia. At 72, after a lifetime of being financially exploited, documenting my family's greed suddenly became senile paranoia. Angela sent a particularly manipulative message. "Dad, you're scaring me. Mom would be so sad to see the family falling apart like this. She always said family is sacred no matter what." Using Martha's memory, Martha, who died without ever knowing how greedy our daughter would become, was the lowest blow of all. Cody tried the victim card. "Uncle, I know I messed up, but you've always been like a real father to me after my parents died. Don't abandon me now when I need you the most. I swear I'll change. Just give me a chance." And Doris, throughout all the emotional chaos, kept showing up like she always did. Unfazed by the drama, she brought homemade soup, watered Martha's beloved porch plants, tidied the kitchen, stacked newspapers and magazines, without asking a single intrusive question about the family crisis she'd clearly heard about from nosy neighbors. "Milton," she said one rainy afternoon, handing me a cup of hot tea as I pretended to read the morning paper. "Sometimes people act terribly when they're scared of losing something important. But that doesn't mean you have to accept being treated badly forever just to keep the peace." It was the closest she'd come to offering direct advice, and it perfectly summed up my inner conflict between family loyalty and self-preservation. On the third day of silence, I decided it was time for a direct confrontation. Not to lash out like a resentful teenager, or to humiliate for fun, or to seek petty revenge, but to set new terms for any future relationship, if one was even still possible after all this betrayal. I called Pastor Williams and explained I needed him present as a neutral mediator for a family reconciliation meeting. He agreed without hesitation, telling me he'd been praying for our family since the day of the fake funeral and felt God was calling him to help bring healing. Then I sent a cold, clear group message to Angela, Derek, and Cody. "Sunday 3 p.m. sharp, my house. Pastor Williams will be present as a mediator. Come ready to hear hard truths and speak honestly. This is the last chance. There won't be another." Sunday arrived heavy with tension, literally. The sky was loaded with dark storm clouds, the air thick and electric like just before a tornado, as if nature itself were setting the scene for the emotional reckoning that was about to unfold. They arrived right at 3 p.m., punctual in a way they hadn't been in years, each wearing a different but equally uncomfortable expression. Angela's eyes were red and swollen from what must have been 72 hours of crying. Derek kept his usual professional lawyer posture, but there was something defensive in his clenched jaw and stiff shoulders. Cody looked like a cornered animal, fidgeting with his hands and avoiding direct eye contact. I arranged the living room almost theatrically, my favorite armchair positioned front and center, directly facing the sofa where they would sit like defendants awaiting judgment. Pastor Williams sat in a neutral side chair, the silent arbiter. On the coffee table, my laptop lay open, showing organized folders and labeled files, evidence collected over weeks of quiet family investigation. "Before any of you say a word," I began, calm but firm, "you need to understand something. This conversation is not about punishment or humiliation. It's about truth and mutual respect. Two things we seem to have lost somewhere along the way these past few years." I opened the laptop and played selected excerpts from the most incriminating recordings captured during my funeral. The silence in the room was so thick, it felt like it had weight. Angela began to cry quietly as her own voice played, coldly suggesting selling the house quickly before the real estate market crashes. Derek squeezed his eyes shut as his calculated remarks about settling the estate once and for all echoed back at him. Cody just sank into the couch like he wanted to disappear when we heard him ask about hidden investments I might have left behind. "Would any of you like to explain those conversations?" I asked, pausing the audio. Angela was the first to break the silence through sobs. "Dad, I didn't mean those things. I was nervous, emotional. Derek said we should start thinking about the practical stuff." "Angela," I interrupted gently but firmly, "you said it was about time to sell the house because it had become a financial deadweight. The house where you grew up became a woman. where your mother lived her last years, where we built our most cherished family memories. Derek tried to regain control with his polished tone. Mr. Barnes, I understand your outrage, but from a legal standpoint, these discussions are common and even advisable in situations like— Derek, I cut in firm again. You secretly drafted legal documents to take control of my assets 6 months before I supposedly got sick. How do you explain that coincidence? The silence that followed was devastating. Derek opened and closed his mouth several times, like a fish out of water, clearly trying to come up with some legalese to justify the unjustifiable. Cody, realizing the moment called for brutal honesty or complete loss of credibility, went with confession. Uncle Milton, I need to admit something I've never had the guts to say. I never used your money for any of those so-called investments. I blew it all on online gambling and trying to impress women at expensive bars in Cincinnati. I'm an idiot, a liar, and probably a gambling addict. But I swear on my parents' memory, I never wanted you dead. I just wanted one more chance to get things right and become the man you always believed I could be. Cody's raw honesty stunned everyone, including me. It was the first time in decades he'd fully owned up to a painful truth about anything in his life. Pastor Williams took the opportunity to step in with gentle wisdom. What we're witnessing here is the result of years of family relationships built on financial need instead of genuine love. Milton, you have every right to feel betrayed and used. Angela, Derek, Cody, you must recognize that you turned a loving father, father-in-law, and uncle into a personal ATM. For the next 3 intense hours, we dissected years of dysfunctional family dynamics. Every habitual request for money, every visit with a hidden agenda, every phone call masked as emotional concern but fueled by financial motives. It was a painful but necessary process, like draining a deep wound. Angela wept through the entire session, admitting she'd grown used to seeing her father as a solution to financial problems, instead of a real person worthy of basic love and respect. Derek acknowledged that his legalistic mindset had dehumanized every family interaction over the years. Cody confessed to decades of elaborate lies about how he spent every cent he borrowed. We established clear rules for any future relationship. No more visits with hidden financial motives. Money would only be discussed when absolutely necessary, and always with full transparency. And above all, they had to see me as a human being with feelings and dignity, not an unlimited financial resource. But I want you to understand one thing, I said at the end of the meeting. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I will forgive you, because holding on to anger would poison my soul and destroy my peace. But broken trust needs to be rebuilt through consistent action, not pretty words said on a difficult afternoon. When they left, physically and emotionally drained, I felt strangely at peace. There was no petty revenge in the air, only balanced justice. No destructive hatred, only healthy boundaries set after decades of silence. Doris showed up an hour later, as punctual as ever, bringing aromatic homemade dinner and her warm, steady presence. "How are you feeling after all that?" she asked simply. Like a 72-year-old man who finally learned the difference between being truly loved and being used, I answered, relieved. It was the end of a destructive phase and the start of something potentially healing. A new chapter where love would be measured by real presence and care, not by selfish convenience or financial dependency. Have you ever had to teach grown adults how to love you properly? It's one of the hardest and most necessary exercises in life. But this story of transformation isn't over yet. There were still $58 million to decide on, a new life to build from scratch, and more lessons in personal dignity to pass on. The message I sent shook Cincinnati like an emotional earthquake. The urn is empty, just like your love. I'm alive. And I heard everything. 12 words that shattered decades of family masks and exposed the true character of the people I thought I loved. What happened in the days that followed went beyond even my most pessimistic expectations of human nature. Angela was the first to call, but not out of relief that I was alive, or to apologize for what she'd said at the funeral. Her voice was laced with a kind of fury I had never heard before. "Dad, what the hell was that ridiculous stunt? You humiliated us in front of everyone. Pastor Williams is telling everyone our family's dysfunctional. Not a single word about being happy I was alive, just rage at having been exposed." "Angela," I tried to interrupt, but she barreled on like a runaway train. No, Dad. Now you're going to listen. This paranoid old man act of yours is tearing our family apart. Derek says we can sue you for emotional damages and public humiliation. Faking your own death is a crime. Emotional damages. She was worried about emotional damages after talking about selling my house during my own funeral. Derek called 2 hours later with the cool tone of a lawyer trying to intimidate someone. Mr. Barnes, I need to inform you that your actions constitute a number of offenses. Forged medical records, misuse of religious property, public defamation. Angela is very emotionally distressed. I think we should meet with my colleague who specializes in family law. Legal threats. That was his response to learning I was alive. Derek, I said calmly, do you really want to talk legal matters with me? Because I have some interesting recordings of your conversations during my funeral. The silence on the line lasted 15 full seconds. Then his voice returned, more measured now. Well, obviously we were all in shock from the loss. Words said in grief don't reflect our true feelings. Words said in grief, as if calculating my house's market value was part of the grieving process. Cody showed up on my doorstep on the third day, but he didn't come alone. He brought 2 men who looked less than trustworthy, the kind you'd expect to find in second-rate bars with criminal records to match. Uncle Milton, he said with a fake smile, we need to talk about that little prank you pulled. Prank. That's what he called exposing the true nature of our family. Look, I get it. You wanted to test us or whatever. But now that the fun's over, let's get to what really matters. You must have saved up a nice chunk over the years working the rails. And since you don't have much time left anyway. He didn't finish the sentence, but the look in his 2 friends' eyes made the rest clear. It was a pathetic attempt at intimidation. Cody, I replied, showing no fear. I think it's best you all leave my property, now. Come on, Uncle, no need to get upset. We're just having a family chat. One of the men, the larger one, took a step forward. Yeah, just a family conversation. That's when I called the police. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed an official record of what was happening. In the days that followed, the pressure campaign intensified. Angela began telling the neighbors I was suffering from senile dementia, claiming my behavior was the result of age-related mental decline. She even went as far as calling Dr. Harrison, my physician, suggesting he examine me for signs of a psychotic break. Derek, always strategic, took a different approach. He started digging into my finances, calling banks, contacting real estate agents, trying to find out exactly how much I had. He even hired a private investigator to comb through my financial life. I found out when the investigator, a man named Roberts, called me directly. Mr. Barnes, he said, I was hired by Mr. Derek Watson to investigate your assets and potential mental incompetence. I thought you should know. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because in 30 years of doing this job, I've never seen anyone hire an investigation against their own living, mentally competent father-in-law. It doesn't sit right with me. Derek had gone so far as to hire spies to investigate me. Things got even darker when I learned they had all met, Angela, Derek, and Cody, to plan a joint strategy. I found out through Doris, who overheard Angela on the phone at the corner bakery. Milton, Doris said while serving me tea on a rainy afternoon. I don't want to worry you, but I heard your daughter saying some very ugly things about you. She was telling someone they needed to take drastic measures before the old man does something stupid with the money. Drastic measures. My own daughter was conspiring against me. She also mentioned something about having you committed, Doris continued, clearly concerned. Said Derek knows a psychiatrist who could issue a mental incapacity report. That was it. They were trying to have me declared mentally unfit in order to seize control of my assets. The final straw came when Angela and Derek showed up at my house with Dr. Philip Stern, a private psychiatrist Derek had hired. Dad, Angela said, putting on a false tone of maternal concern, we're all really worried about your recent behavior. Dr. Stern is just going to ask you a few questions to evaluate your mental state. It's a standard procedure for someone your age who's been acting unusually, Derek added. Dr. Stern, a man in his 50s with gold-rimmed glasses and an air of intellectual superiority, opened a folder and began. Mr. Barnes, let's start with a few simple questions. Do you know what day it is? It was an ambush. They had prepared a psychiatric evaluation to declare me legally incompetent. Doctor, I interrupted politely. Do you have legal authorization to perform this evaluation? Because as far as I know, I didn't request any psychiatric exam. Doctor. Stern looked over at Derek, visibly uneasy. Well, technically, doctor, you're on my property without permission, attempting to perform an unsolicited medical procedure. That qualifies as trespassing and the unauthorized practice of medicine. The man turned pale. Derek tried to step in. Mr. Barnes, there's no need to be hostile. We're just worried about your well-being. My well-being, Derek? Or about the possibility that I might spend the money you think you're entitled to? The silence that followed said it all. No one denied it. That's when I made a final definitive decision. The family I had loved and supported for decades hadn't changed a bit after being confronted with their own recorded words. If anything, they doubled down on their greed, trying now to have me declared mentally unfit. Angela kept up her smear campaign around the neighborhood. Derek deepened his legal digging. Cody showed up 2 more times, each time with a different group of friends, always under the same thin disguise of family concern, always with that edge of veiled threat. They weren't sorry. They were furious for getting caught. During one of my morning walks with Doris, she made a comment that summed it all up perfectly. Milton, I grew up in a time when people felt shame when they were caught doing wrong. Nowadays, they just get mad at the person who caught them. That was it exactly. They weren't ashamed of what they'd said or done. They were angry at me for discovering it. Angela even went so far as to call social services, reporting me as a senior at risk who was making irrational decisions due to advanced age. A social worker came to my home for an evaluation. Mr. Barnes, she said, we received an anonymous report about your condition. May I ask you a few questions? After 20 minutes of conversation, she closed her folder with a sigh. Mr. Barnes, it's clear you are fully mentally competent. Whoever filed this report was either misinformed or had other motives. Other motives. Even a stranger could see through my family's intentions. And then, during this week of coordinated attacks, I got the most revealing call of all. Angela, in the middle of the night, probably after a few glasses of wine, let her true frustration slip out. Dad, you don't get it. Derek and I had plans for that money. We were going to expand the real estate business, buy that lot downtown. Cody needs to pay off his gambling debts before someone breaks his legs. You're being selfish, hoarding it all for yourself. Selfish. For not handing over my money to fund their dreams and cover Cody's gambling losses. It was time to end this charade once and for all. They'd had a full week to reflect, apologize, show even a shred of humanity or regret. Instead, they organized a coordinated campaign to intimidate, defame, and potentially rob me. I picked up the phone and called each of them. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., my house. Come prepared to hear some truths you won't like. It was time for the final reckoning. They arrived right at 2 p.m., but the air was thick with hostility. Angela walked into my home like a warrior, heading into her final battle. Derek carried a folder of legal documents under his arm, his lawyer armor. Cody looked nervous, constantly glancing around like he expected trouble. Dad? Angela said before even sitting down. We're hoping you called us here to apologize for that ridiculous stunt. Apologize. I was supposed to apologize for uncovering what they truly thought of me. Sit down, I replied calmly, because you're going to want to be comfortable for what comes next. Derek immediately opened his folder. Mr. Barnes, I've brought some documents we need to discuss. First, a power of attorney, allowing competent individuals to manage your assets. Second, a non-disclosure agreement regarding the events of last week. Derek, I interrupted, put those papers away. We won't be needing them. I grabbed my laptop and opened the files I'd carefully prepared. On the screen, dozens of recordings, sorted by date and participant. Before we talk about paperwork, how about we listen to a few interesting conversations? I clicked on the first file. Angela's voice filled the room. We should have sold the house already. It's become dead weight. Angela went pale. Dad, that was taken out of context. I was just... Out of context? I asked, pausing the recording. The context was my funeral, Angela. You were talking about selling my house less than 24 hours after I was supposedly dead. I skipped to the next file. Derek's voice. At least now we can finally take care of this situation. Derek, I said, explain to me. What did you mean by take care of this situation? Derek tried to keep his professional tone. I was referring to the legal matters that naturally arise when someone dies, I cut in. Interesting. You all seemed very prepared for those legal matters. Then I played the clip of Cody. You think he left anything invested we don't know about? Cody shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Uncle, I was just worried if you had everything organized for the family. Organized for the family or for yourselves? I asked, staring him down. For the next 15 minutes, I played the most damning clips one by one. Every toxic word, every calculated comment, every clear sign that they saw my death as a financial opportunity, not a personal loss. With each recording, their expressions changed. The initial anger gave way to discomfort, then to fear, and finally to desperation, once they realized how much evidence I had. Now, I said, closing the laptop, it's time for you to receive your gifts. I picked up 3 envelopes I had carefully prepared. Each one contained a full transcript of that person's words during the funeral, along with a printed photo of the exact moment those words were spoken. Angela opened hers and read silently. Her hands began to tremble. Derek examined his like a legal document, but I could see his jaw tightening as he read. Cody glanced at the first few lines, then dropped the paper onto the table. These transcripts, I said calmly, are copies. The originals are stored with Pastor Williams and my lawyer. If anything happens to me, an accident, forced psychiatric commitment, anything at all, they'll be automatically released to the entire city of Cincinnati. The silence in the room was deafening. But I'm sure you're wondering, I continued, why a retired railway worker is making such a fuss over a few unfortunate comments. I stood and walked to the window, watching Doris water her garden across the street. The answer is simple. 3 weeks before you got my message about the terminal illness, something interesting happened to me. I turned to face them. I won $58 million in the lottery. The impact was immediate and devastating. Angela dropped the envelope. Derek's mouth hung open. For the first time since I'd met him, Cody simply muttered, "Oh shit. 58 million, I repeated slowly, savoring every word. And none of you had a clue. Angela was the first to recover from the shock. Dad, this changes everything. If we had known you won, if you had known, I cut in. If you had known, you would have faked love for money instead of showing indifference to my death? Is that what you're saying?" Derek tried to regain control. Mr. Barnes, I understand your frustration, but now that we know the truth, perhaps we can reconsider. Reconsider what, Derek? You had your chance to show who you really are when you thought I was dying broke. And you did. Cody stood from his chair. Uncle, please. I know I've made mistakes, but we're family. You can't what? I asked, staring him down. The question hung in the air like a guillotine waiting to drop. Angela tried a new tactic, forced tears beginning to well up. Dad, I know I hurt you, but I'm your daughter. Martha always said family forgives. Don't you dare mention your mother, I said, colder than I thought I could be. Martha died believing you loved me. At least she didn't have to see what I've seen. Derek opened his folder again, desperate. Legally, you can't just cut us off. Derek, I interrupted one last time. You're about to find out exactly what I can and cannot do. I walked over to my desk and picked up a document I had finalized with my lawyer the week before. This is my updated will, I announced, holding up the paper. It was officially filed yesterday. The fear on their faces was almost tangible. Want to know what it says? I asked, looking at the 3 people who had just realized they'd lost $58 million with their own words. This was the moment of final truth. The moment they would discover the true cost of greed. You want to know what I plan to do with the money? I asked, looking at 3 faces that had just realized they'd lost access to $58 million by their own doing. The silence was thick enough to cut with a knife. Angela had stopped crying. Derek let the folder fall to the floor. Cody just sank deeper into his chair, like he'd been punched in the gut. First, I said calmly, let me be absolutely clear. None of you in this room will receive a single cent of my fortune. Angela was the first to react. You can't do that. I'm your only daughter. Derek and I have legal rights. Actually, I continued unfazed, I can do exactly that. It's my money, won while you were all ignoring me, and my decisions are already in motion. Derek tried to pull himself back into professional mode. Mr. Barnes, there are still legal succession rights. Derek, I interrupted, do you really want to talk legal rights with me? Because I'm pretty sure I've got recordings of you suggesting ways to have me declared mentally incompetent in order to take control of my assets. He shut his mouth instantly. So, what are you going to do with the money? Cody asked, his voice strained. I smiled for the first time in that entire meeting. I've created the Milton Barnes Foundation for Neglected Seniors. It's an organization I'll personally lead and manage over the coming years. A foundation? Angela practically shouted. You're throwing our inheritance away on charity? I'm not throwing it away, I corrected firmly. I'm investing in people who actually need help. Seniors abandoned by greedy families. People like I almost became. I continued. The foundation begins operations immediately. I'll dedicate my time and resources to making sure no other elderly person goes through what I went through. With you. Derek, still trying to find a legal angle, asked, and how much of the fortune is going to this organization? Enough to operate properly and grow as needed, I replied without giving a number. I'll personally oversee every aspect to ensure the money is used the right way. What about Doris? Angela snapped, accusatory. I'm sure that manipulator walked away with something big from all this. For the first time that afternoon, I felt real anger rise. Doris will receive $5,800,000, exactly 10% of the lottery winnings. Not because she manipulated anything, but because she showed real love. When the rest of you disappeared. The groan Derek let out was almost audible. Additionally, I added, she'll receive the renovated house on Elm Street and lifetime medical care. Because people of character deserve to be rewarded. You're giving millions to a stranger, Angela exploded. A stranger? I repeated, feeling the weight of decades of frustration. Doris came to my door every day when you all disappeared. She offered her retirement savings to help me. She cried at my funeral while you were calculating profit margins. Cody made one last desperate attempt. Uncle, think about my daughter. She's your great-granddaughter. You're going to abandon your own family? Cody, I replied coldly. Your 8-year-old daughter has never visited me. She doesn't even know I exist. And you're not being abandoned. You're just not getting access to money that was never yours. Derek, ever the lawyer, kept trying to find a loophole. What if we contest this? Claims of coercion, undue influence from the neighbor? Go ahead, I said calmly. But remember, I have recordings of you planning to have me committed. I have documentation of the attempted bribe to Dr. Stern. I have a record of the false report to social services. Are you sure you want all of that made public? Silence returned. This time, the silence of complete defeat. Transfers to Doris have already been authorized and will be processed this week, I informed them. The foundation is being legally registered. My plans are in motion. Angela broke down. You can't do this to us. We're your family. You had 72 years to be my family, I replied. You chose to be my exploiters. I stood, signaling that the meeting was over. This is the last time we meet in this house. It will be the first property donated to the foundation. Doris will move into Elm Street next week. I walked to the door and opened it. You can leave, and don't come back. Angela left crying. Derek muttered something about this not being over. Cody just shook his head in defeat. When the door closed, I felt a peace I hadn't known in decades. Through the window I saw Doris watering her flowers, unaware that in just a few days, her life was about to change forever. Unlike my family, I knew Doris would use this opportunity to spread kindness, not hoard resentment. After all, some people truly deserve miracles, and I finally had the power to create them. Now, I'm curious about you, who just heard my story. What would you do in my shoes? Have you ever gone through something like this? Let me know down in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And while you're here, I'm leaving one of our favorite stories on the end screen, one that's guaranteed to surprise you. Thanks for watching.